I'm out here in Central Park. I'm out here in Central Park in the area of Seneca Village. Seneca Village was an African American community located around 86 to 82nd Street here in Central Park. And it was eminent domain was used to clear out the residents and develop Central Park. So we're gonna walk around the area known as Seneca Village. Right now we're currently at a location that they label as Summit Rock. And according to some of the history here, this area was where they gathered and they met up, had picnics, and just hung out, you know. Kind of like it was the old school version of the shopping mall. Like I grew up, we as a teenager, young adult, we hung out in shopping malls. A lot of people still do that where they have shopping malls, but Summit Rock was a place where people of Seneca Village gathered together. University of Columbia archaeologists are still, discovering different parts of Seneca Village, through the research that they did do and the, I don't know what it's called in archaeology, when they do a dig. I know it's a name for it, I just can't think of that name right now, where they found pottery, shoes from the area that, during the era of when Seneca Village was thriving. So they say the neighborhood only lasted about 25 years because it started, because slavery ended in New York State in 1827. And the neighborhood started to develop around the 1830s, 1832. And it lasted up until 1825. (1855). The myth was most of the residents that were removed were squatters and those that they did pay for their property, they paid them a good value. That is was told prior to the discovery of the census, that a lot of these residents actually owned their homes, because in New York State during that time, to vote you had to be a property owner. That was the only way you were able to vote in New York State. Was that you had to own property. So it's pretty spread out. I really don't know where all the locations that I've seen the map and all of that stuff, but it's still more. It's still more like spread out throughout the park in this particular area. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I brought my cinema camera, but it's something going wrong with it. I actually can't say what's actually wrong with it, but it's not, the recording keeps stopped, so I have to go home and check it out and see what's going on with it to why it's not recording. Yeah. I don't know if I passed it or if this part over here is Seneca Village too. I walked it before. I'm getting so many different paths in the park that it's taking me around, but I think it's back this way. So I'm gonna go back this way and see. But it's a nice day out here. I'm coming up to a marker now. Yeah. This is another marker. This is a little map of Seneca Village. Yeah. Like right now we're around like 86th Street, I believe. I don't see a spring. I believe this area here that I'm walking around now was like the Seneca Village, you know. And more research is still being done to actually look at what were the boundaries. They have some boundaries, but New York City as a whole, a lot of the neighborhoods in New York, their boundaries are not set in stone. You know, they move just like the names of the neighborhoods change. The boundaries change also. But this surrounding area where I'm walking around is Seneca Village. Yeah, so this area here, all around here was a neighborhood built by African Americans during slavery. So yeah, so this neighborhood was built during slavery. While slavery was still happening in the United States, Seneca Village existed. Just like Weeksville in Brooklyn, there were a lot of neighborhoods in the United States that were African American neighborhoods that developed during slavery, which you don't really hear a lot about. And that's the fascinating history that I want to talk about too, to just bring that out. As an urban planner, all this is very enlightening to me because eminent domain was used to remove the residents from Seneca Village. And then we go to the 1960s and think about the urban renewal, or the Highway Act of, I believe, 1949, or was it the Housing Act of 1949? I may be getting the dates wrong. I will actually put that in the description. Eminent domain was used, and when you do the history of that, the majority of neighborhoods that were uprooted were African American neighborhoods. So there's a linkage between the government, like the Central Park was a good thing. It wanted to create oasis in urban jungle, create an oasis, because it was the Industrial Revolution jumping off here in the United States during the early 1800s. And as it began to go into the turn of the century, so it was a lot of congestion, a lot of smog, smoke. It was just so crowded and congested. Central Park was an oasis inside of all of that. But how they did it and how the U.S. government, and when I say U.S. government, I also mean the federal, state, city, county governments as well. All of those are arms of the federal government. So I see them as one, because at any given moment, the federal government can, the federal government can come in and control any of those other levels of the government. And we see that when the federal government takes over schools, just like the state takes over a city's public school system like they did in Detroit. And then the federal government can come in and clean up. When we go back to think about when the federal government had to go down to Mississippi after during the civil rights movement, the federal government had to step in because the police were part of the people participating in all the violence in the civil that was taking place during the civil rights era. And so I'm saying all this to say that the way governments do things, the United States government carry out actions to create a better environment for all of its citizens. It sometimes steps over other people's rights to fulfill that, like Central Park here. Think about all the homes that were bulldozed to make this. And there are records to show that there were homeowners. A majority of the African Americans here owned their homes. And I'll put a link to Seneca Village where you can actually read up on the history yourself. I believe that's always better than hearing it from somebody else. You get it you hear about it for yourself. So, well, like I said, this is all fascinating to me that, standing on history here. And when I first came here, I didn't know about Seneca Village. I didn't know about it, just like I didn't know about Weeksville. I heard about free African Americans during slavery. There was a lot of free African Americans, but I didn't know that during slavery, they built up thriving communities and neighborhoods, So Seneca Villages, all of this that we're looking at right now. And the entire composition of Seneca Village was African American, Irish American, and German Americans. That made up the neighborhood of Seneca Village. That made up the residents. Yeah, all of this was a thriving community. So that's a little essay, little report on Seneca Village, African American neighborhood here in New York City in the early 1800s that was, you know, uprooted to create Central Park where we standing right now. And Central Park is, if not the most filmed location in the world, or one of the top film locations, you know. There's always somebody filming. There's a movie about Central Park, you know, whether the movie is based in New York or not. Folks talking about Central Park. It's a beautiful park. It's a beautiful park. All right, y'all, that's it. Peace.